Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Elevenses at Diesel Bookstore. We have a very special show this morning. Normally, we get together here in our safe book space, and we meet with our publishers' reps to talk about new and exciting upcoming books. But every once in a while, we have a special guest, which we do today. We have Sonya Walger with us today. And we're very excited and so happy you could join us, Sonya.
Thank you so much for having me. I just said it to you, but you guys are my second home. You really are. I feel so thrilled to be anything to do with you.
We appreciate it so much. And Sonya's new book, Wifehouse, went on sale yesterday. And tonight, Sonya will be at Diesel, her second home, and at 6:30 p.m. And you'll be talking about Wifehouse then. So let me just give you a little bit of an introduction, Sonya, and then we'll launch right into talking about Wifehouse because I have many questions.
Okay, good. I hope I can answer them.
So Sonya is an award-winning actress, and she is best known for her role as Penny Whitmore on Lost. Everybody knows you from Lost. Molly Cobb in the first 3 seasons of Apple TV's For All Mankind, and other highlights from the original Broadway production of Frost Nixon, Parenthood, Tell Me You Love Me, which I love that show, Scandal, Flash Forward, and In Treatment, which is one of my favorite shows of all time. And you studied at English literature at Christ Church, Oxford. And you've been the host of your own literary podcast, Bookish, which is also available on your website. Your first book, Lion, which was an absolute and still is favorite at Diesel, is a semi-autobiographical novel published by New York Review Books in February of 2025. And now we have Wifehouse. So my favorite quote about Wifehouse is from Miranda Cowley Heller, who wrote The Paper Palace. And she said, Wifehouse reads like a storm in a soundproof room, which is just a beautiful way of describing this intense domestic drama that Wifehouse is. But I'm going to ask you, Sonya, to give us a little bit of a description of what the book is about.
Well, I agree. Isn't it a wonderful quote? I got chills when I read it for the first time.
Beautiful.
She's a beautiful writer and she's a great poet. You should read her book of poetry. It's really something. Anyway, thank you, Miranda, and thank you for that lovely introduction. So Wifehouse is about the sort of on the surface of it is about the unraveling of a marriage and the slow disintegration of this particular unit. In many ways, I don't think of it as the end of a family, but I think of it as the reconfiguring of one. It takes place in the space of a year. It is bookended by 2 different Christmas lunches, one at which Annie is the hostess. And I really wanted to chart this very intimate drama in this very confined space. I wanted the intimacy of a marriage, and I wanted the confinement of a single year in which to watch it, enact it in some ways. And the other thing I really wanted to do was to write it from everyone's point of view. I felt like a combination of things. I read constantly all the time. I'm never not got 3-4 books on the go. For an actress, I am horribly poorly watched, but I am very well read. So it's you win some, you lose some. But I have gravitated my whole life, I think, to books on marriage. I just have found it long before I was married. Just riveting, just absolutely riveting. The minutiae and the tiny incremental cracks and fissures that occur in this private space that's really only witnessed properly by, the players involved. That to me is just endlessly fascinating. So that was what I was sort of setting out to try and explore. As an actor, as a woman, I've spent my life playing roles that have been great, lots of them. But I'm going to be honest, most of the time I have sat on set being like, I wish I was playing his role most of the time. So the great liberating moment of discovering as a novelist that I can play everyone, that I can be all the parts, that I can be the man and the woman and the mother-in-law and the child is is a little bit giddy making. It's a little bit exhilarating. Like I might have to stop myself from always writing from everyone's point of view.
But why? But why stop?
Why stop? Agree. Why stop?
Yeah. I've of my 4 novels, I think there's only one told from one point of view.
Mm-hmm.
Because and I think it's putting yourself getting to live in another perspective, putting yourself in another person's. Don't walk along in the neighborhood here and see various lawn signs that people have or
Mm-hmm.
bumper stickers and wonder to myself, what is that person thinking? How did
Yeah.
they get to this point of
Yeah.
view?
That's right.
And when you're a novelist, you get to imagine what it is. But
Yeah.
really, it's fiction, but in a way, there's much more. I find that people reveal themselves much more in their fiction than in their nonfiction when they're writing memoirs. They're more cautious.
Yes. Now that I've written 2 and I'm deep into my 3rd, I'm not sure I would even draw the line between fiction and non.
Hmm.
I don't really understand it. I mean, I think even if you're writing Napoleon's biography, you are to some degree writing your own. I truly believe the act of writing something down is a fictive act. It no longer is the morning I just experienced. By act of writing it down, it is a fictitious, it is a fiction. It is not my son's experience of this morning. It's not my husband's experience of this morning. It is by definition partial, which means it cannot be quote unquote true. So I am, it's why Lion, my first book, I unequivocally describe it as fiction. All of it happened and all of it is fiction. So, and Wifehouse is similarly is a full act of fiction. I have not left my husband or my children. I have no conscious desire to. And yet at some level, this book must be an unconscious exploration of what that act might feel like. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think we're in a good moment for that sort of blurring of lines between
Mm.
fiction and nonfiction now because we're sort of in a post-truth reality.
Yes.
There isn't one anymore, or it is whatever you say it is, and I think that is a unique gift and challenge
Yes.
for a writer.
100%. Mm.
Both of those things are where are is it, and that's why I think that sort of auto fiction has it's now just the go-to. Well, we don't know. Did it happen? Did it not happen? It doesn't really
Yes.
matter. It's auto
Yes.
fiction, so
Yes, exactly. I don't love the title autofiction. It feels like something you wrote in a car. Like I can't quite get my head around
exactly.
it.
There's something very mechanical about that term. I agree. You had wrote a lovely piece for Lithub, which we'll link to,
Thank you.
and everybody can just click on that later and take a look. But in the piece this morning, you said marriage. You had a lovely line about marriage that it's the ability to control 2 conflicting narratives and hold them both in tension, which I thought was really interesting. It's a sort of a very poetic and beautiful way of saying he said, she said, kind of, right?
I think, yeah. I mean, I think for anyone in a committed relationship, that is the. I'm going to speak. I think to a long-term one, marriage or no, that is the central tension of it. I think is the ability to navigate 2 different versions of the same story and reconcile them and learn when to challenge that narrative and when to let it go, and at what point that narrative is then corroding your own sense of self or your own version of that story. At what point it becomes untenable to live alongside someone else's version of that story. That to me is endlessly interesting. And as I say, this stage where both people are living out effectively in the same play. Forgive me, I'm an actor, so I'm always reduced to these performative metaphors, but it's what comes to mind. You're both in the same play, and yet you both have come from your own plays. You're both living your fully separate dramas simultaneously in the presence of this other play. it's 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 a miracle we do it. It's a miracle. It's a miracle We do it over and over, day in, day out. I think it's and the novel lends itself so exquisitely to the subject of marriage, I think, because it is by nature interior, because you can be inside April Wheeler's head, and in Revolutionary Road, which is one of my all-time great books on marriage, and you can at the same moment be inside the husband's head, watching her perform horribly on stage and him mortified at the prospect. I have a sort of homage to it in Wifehouse, where Annie goes to see her husband on stage, and it's a nod to the beginning of Revolutionary Road and the magic of this magic trick you can pull off as a novelist of interiority and what's experienced and what's perceived, and the simultaneity of that.
Yes, and beyond that, the novel is actually written from, and yeah, this is something else I wanted to talk about. The multiple perspectives, but it's not just the two of them. So you've written the novel from Annie, who is the protagonist, her husband Hector, who's an actor, both of her kids. She has a teenage daughter and
Mm-hmm.
a son who's a little bit younger, her friend, and the Thierry, who is the young French tutor who she winds up having an affair with. So some wonderful range, and it must have been really fun to explore all of those perspectives. But why include all of them?
Hmm. It's a good question. It felt, to my mind, that had been the challenge of the book to begin with, was to write a piece in which you heard from everyone, even if it prejudiced your love, support, investment in Annie as she moved through this. It felt I was after something that felt as close to complete as it could be in this configuration.
Mhm.
I think, weirdly, the one that felt very important was the inclusion of the best friend.
Mhm,
It felt like, when when a relationship in our surroundings founders, I think at this age, it impacts everyone. It's always a moment of like, oh, wow, they're doing that. Should we do that? Does everyone doing that? Is that what's happening now? That ripple and this sense of, what did I miss as a friend, or betrayal as a friend, that is not the same as the husband who's been betrayed. It's a different, but it's an adjacent sense of misgiving and loss, grief, I think. That to me felt like a voice I don't hear very often in fiction, and not something that I'd sort of heard explored. I'm always trying to write a book I haven't read, and a book
mhm.
that to me doesn't exist yet, that's constantly, infiltrated by all the books that I have read, but that isn't out there. And that was what I was sort of after with Wifehouse, was something in which my protagonist was not punished for her choice. She doesn't take arsenic. She doesn't throw herself under a train. She doesn't, she pays a price, as everybody does, for this. But she's not ostracized by society. She's not Nora in a doll's house being kicked at. There's something different happening at the end of the book. That felt important to me. And it felt important to hear from everyone who was impacted by this, is impacted by her choices. And so that was why.
That's interesting because I felt like she really did get punished.
Hmm.
And that sort of leads me to, I thought this was very interesting when I was reading your essay this morning, and
Mm-hmm.
you were talking a lot about how the book really focused in, honed in on marriage, and
Mm-hmm.
a lot of it was about marriage. And for me, my immediate thought was about a book Claire Dederer wrote called Monsters, A
Oh.
Fan's Dilemma. And she in this book, she is a series of essays which are very subjective, which she says from the beginning, about very famous artists who have done monstrous things.
Mm-hmm.
And can we separate the art from the
Mm-hmm.
artist? And she has a lot of examples. She has Miles Davis, Michael Jackson, on and on,
Mm.
Salvador Dali, and she goes on. She has only a couple of women in there. And when she
Mm.
talks about when women do this and when women artists are considered monsters, it's because they leave their children.
Mm-hmm.
And that's sort of like the number one sin
Mm-hmm.
for a woman
Yeah.
leaving the kids. And that was, for me, reverberated throughout
Mm,
um, the entire novel. That was something that
mm.
I was thinking about, and I wondered if that was sort of thrumming under the
Oh,
surface.
a huge piece of it. A huge piece of it. That is the other sort of core nexus to explore was what is the price of a woman who is an artist pays for her maternity? And what if that price has actually been being paid throughout? Like, felt too simplistic and reductive to say, well, you have to choose. It's either your women or it's either your
Right,
children or your career, right?
right.
Because I don't believe that. I actually don't subscribe to that. I don't subscribe to the fact that that is a choice that is that binary and that is
Mhm,
made in the instance of birth. I actually believe that as a woman, you have been sloughing off your own agency for a long time in anticipation of that moment. Sorry, these damn things. And that therefore there is an accretion of self sabotage that has happened, at least in Annie's life, that means that the arrival of her children is the culmination of something she has
mm.
already been doing to herself for
Right.
years.
She's sort of, yeah, it's incremental, I feel like.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
you do right when she's remembering the two of them in the early days of their relationship and how his acting,
Hmm.
it seemed like a lot of her art was subsumed,
Hmm.
by his acting and his art.
Yeah.
And then it was a gradual kind of an incremental process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think, having my main character be an artist who loses her sense of self, to be reductive about it, over the course of a marriage and over the course of raising a family, that becomes a useful stand in for the sense of self as a woman, I think. I don't think this is a unique crisis for artists who are
Mhm,
married. I
mhm,
think it becomes a useful sort of repository for looking at what happens to a woman and her sense of identity in the presence of a whole new configuration of people around her and the proximity of that, and how to integrate the maternal part of her with the outward dinner party hosting part of her. And how do we, or the loyal wife, or the front facing, she stages houses for a living, how to reconcile these pieces of oneself, that when the maternal one is the one that tends to dominate and that tends to sort of, the domestic one is the one that sort of becomes more and more prominent. How do you retrieve those pieces of you and keep them together in integrity while you're a mother? I think that's a really interesting question. I live it every day. I think it's a really interesting
It
thing.
is. It's fascinating. I think in Annie's case, I mean, for me, reading, and I think that readers will have different reactions
Mm,
depending how which you've also captured in the novel, the different reactions of the people around her and her kids and her husband. But, my thought about it was that she had to detach, which she's had a lot of practice doing.
mm,
She grew up in an abusive home,
mm,
and her mother the father was abusive, and the mother didn't really protect her from that.
mhm,
And so a certain amount of detachment is required in order to
mhm,
survive something like this. And I think now that she's in this situation, she has to detach from, uh, her marriage, her
mhm,
friendships, her kids. And when she's fully attached is when she sort of begins this affair
mm.
and then allows herself to really feel everything
Mhm.
at once and kind of loses herself in it. And it's
Yes,
very seductive.
I think that's right. I think that's exactly right. And, it takes, I'm going to try and avoid giving away too much of the plot, but, it
Right.
takes an unexpected loss to make Annie vulnerable to this particular set of circumstances that she finds herself in. When I conceived of the book, I wrote this book really quite quickly. I wrote it in about 8 months. And I was very clear from the outset, in a way that I'm not on book 3, and I wish I had this clarity again. But I was very clear that it would be that it would take place in a year, and that it would be bookended by these two Christmases. And then I had this central image that just was like a dream image. It was like a fragment, but I knew it was the tent pole of the book, which was this image of Annie on a lawn surrounded by her childhood objects, furniture, things, and being forced to confront her past, really, but in this sort of reified way with her bedroom furniture as a kid. And I didn't know how it got there, and I didn't know what she'd be doing or what it was all on the lawn for, but I knew that that was what I was writing towards. Because it felt like, as you rightly identified, that there needed to be a porousness to her emotionally that had not been there in the past, and that something had to be broken again for her to be available to a different.
But it's like she knows it is tragic in a way because she knows what the consequences are going to be
Mm-hmm.
emotionally
Yeah.
and for her kids, and she sort of lets it happen to, and that for me is that essential tension of the novel, is
Mm-hmm.
whether or not she's going to reclaim that and what she's
Mm-hmm.
sacrificing, and will she ever
Mm-hmm.
get it back.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of, as the characters, as the people around her react, I think readers may react depending where they are on the spectrum of
No
motherhood.
question. No question. It's
Will,
yeah.
sorry, will sort of see her as less than likable,
Mm.
to go back to Deaderer and the monster of the
Mm-hmm.
woman who leaves her kids.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering, when you were writing her, if it was, and knowing that this is a reaction that she's getting in the book, but also that readers may have.
Mm.
And I know writers get cautioned about writing characters who aren't likable, especially when it comes to, although that is changing a little bit now, but especially when it comes to women. And there
Mm.
needs to be, and this being one of the great taboos of women leaving their children. And
Mm.
I'm wondering how it felt to write that. Was it freeing to write that,
Yeah,
or?
I think I don't I've spent too many years acting to
Mhm.
really get involved with that conversation. It's not my job as an actor to make you like the person that I'm playing. It's my job to love them so wholeheartedly that I can embody them in a way that you might understand them. And that's not the same thing, right? It doesn't, understanding somebody is not the same as liking them. We can understand the
Absolutely.
reasons that, and so I think in many ways that's where, the 25 or 30 years that I've been acting is as such an asset as a writer. I feel very, very divested of, uninvested in the idea of anyone liking anyone in my books at all. I don't mean to sound high-handed about that. I just mean it's not on my radar. What is my north is, have I climbed inside them in such a way as to make them intelligible to you, emotionally legible to you? Have you, for a moment, walked in their shoes? Now, you may not have liked the fit. It might have been too tight. They might not have been the shoes you'd have chosen. But have you walked in their shoes for that chapter or for that paragraph? And if you have, and you've had that micro experience of being a devastated husband or an absolutely obliterated woman trying to work out how to hold herself intact, or a bewildered best friend, or a, overwhelmed teenage girl babysitting in a strange house. If I have given you that fragment and you have left moved by it, albeit in outrage or rejection, then I have done my job. And then it is for you to go away and have your experience of the book. The book ceases to be mine at this point. The book is now your book and everybody's book. And Annie is no longer my Annie, she's your Annie. And what you make of Annie, I hope, would be the same that you might make of any person you sat next to at dinner and who shared themselves with you, where you leaned in and thought, wow, I wouldn't do that, but I feel for
Mhm,
you.
mhm.
And that would be my hope for the book.
And I felt I was very invested in her decisions. I became very
Mm,
invested as a reader, but also I was fascinated by the relationships between women
Hmm.
in this novel specifically. They tend to not be very supportive of each other in this novel.
Really interesting.
Yeah, well, I was thinking her friend,
Candace.
Candace, her friend, who is another perspective you use, and who gives her the gift of these French lessons with the with the young man to begin with. She is bewildered by her actions and really not very supportive of her.
Mm.
I feel like the other women in her life, well, her husband's mother, her mother-in-law, her own mother,
Mm.
um, uh, and then later on, I guess these are all mothers, right? They're all judging.
They're
And
all
then
mothers.
Thierry's mother,
That
ultimately, who she meets as well. Yeah. And doesn't get a lot of,
you isolated, identified correctly the common denominator, which is that they're all mothers, and there is
yeah,
none so unforgiving of another mother as a mother, and that was intentional. And there was also just a sort of structural thing, which was I needed to make Annie as isolated as possible.
right.
I needed to make this happen in a vacuum so that she was clamoring alone. There was a moment when I was writing it when I thought, does she go to therapy? And I thought, no, she doesn't. I don't actually want her trying to tease apart why this is happening. It should be as inchoate to her as it possibly could be. It should be an instinct that she is following, not an argument that she is arriving at through, with an advocate kind of
Right.
thing. So there was an intention behind isolating her too.
That makes sense. Absolutely. And she will just have to figure it out.
Mm.
I another just to an aside kind of and back to the multiple perspectives again. So there's a point in the novel where her husband is on location making a movie, and there's the opportunity presents itself for him to have an affair,
Mm-hmm.
and he doesn't. And I just thought that was really so well done. I just his whole it's because it's complicated. It's multi-level. It's not just because maybe I'll get caught or, you know, the standard kinds of reasons or like the opportunity isn't good enough. It's much more layered and complex. And I thought that was so interesting and such a great counterpoint to Annie's transgression.
Thank you. I'm so glad. I love that you saw it that way. I was very intentional as well, was that it should present as though the obvious one who was going to stray was the good-looking actor who's on location with
Right.
an empty hotel room. And it felt much more interesting to actually make it, the domestic grubby one who's doing it on the kitchen floor while the nanny's out,
Right.
than the one who had all the opportunity in the world. But it also felt like a real chance to explore who Hector was, which felt
Right.
I loved writing Hector. I really, really did. He of all
That
the
really shows, I have to say,
uh,
that really shows, that really comes through in the read and afterwards as well, in the aftermath, and the way that he deals with it is so well written and so sensitively done and layered and
mm,
interesting.
thank you.
And not what I think in a lot of ways Annie remains a cipher because she's a cipher to herself. She doesn't
Yeah.
understand her own impulses or what's
Mm.
happening. Hector is a lot clearer in a lot of ways, you know?
Yes. I think that's right. I think that was my experience of writing her too. And I think to some degree I felt like this is okay because Annie is going to be so projected on by the reader that
Mhm.
we it's okay that she doesn't quite know what she's doing, because certainly as a woman reader, but I think as a male reader too, she will be freighted with other people's reasons for why she's doing it. And it's not to say I think I was very clear with why and how and the reasons of the backstory and the whole thing as to why she would leave. But she is opaque even to herself, even by the end. As I say, she is groping after an instinct, and those things remain inarticulate sometimes.
Right, exactly. I think a lot of it comes back to art, actually. And her art The art is a really strong undercurrent theme here, and the way their own art comes out, and what they sacrifice for it, if they don't sacrifice for it, if they lose it. And to get back to the autobiographical nature of things, you've spent many, many, many years acting, and that's your art, but also you have this, you're a wonderful writer as well. So I'm wondering about how the two different art forms work for you. Acting, I know you've said that writing allows you to play all of the roles you wanted to play and haven't been able to. But there's such a split between acting and writing, in that writing is such a solitary pursuit. And acting is really kind of the opposite of that. It's really an ensemble kind of effort.
Yeah.
So how does that work for you?
I mean, I don't really subscribe to this, but I am a Gemini, so I think
Me too.
I suspect it works swimmingly for me. Yes, of course, and they are polar opposites in that regard. One is about the most collaborative thing you can do. You literally can't do it on your own, and the other one dies in the presence of another person. So
Yep.
they are left hand and right hand. I think of them as sisters. I really do. I think of them as, the older I get, the more I just feel like it's just all a way of putting something of yourself into the world. I can make a great chicken pot pie and be like, look what I made. That didn't exist, and I made it. And I can, I'm a hopeless artist, but I watercolor and I journal every day, most days. I am by nature someone who itches to make things. I really do. Whether they're consumed or seen is sort of an irrelevance. I just am a restless soul if I'm not taking something from inside me and making it visible. And I think we are all creative beings to some degree. And all of us, you make a lunchbox, that can be your creative act for the day, whether you're conscious of it or not.
Absolutely, a cake,
Totally, right?
Yeah.
So for me, they feel at this ripe age, it feels less of a schism and more of just fingers of the same hand of, that's right, I'm writing now. I mean, I have completely unexpectedly just got an acting job, acted for 3 years or something. And I've been happily, devotedly writing and consumed with, getting this third book moving and editing this and still doing stuff for Lion. And it's been great. It's been a really full and fruitful time. And I've felt so delighted to have this whole other strand of my life going on as I stride into my second half of my life, particularly as, let's face it, acting jobs become few and far between for 50-year-old white ladies. Not so many of juicy ones left. So, and I was really okay with that. I really was. I was like, yeah, that was then, and this is what I do now. And yeah, I can just eat scones and stare at the squirrels and write books. This is fantastic. So to literally 3 weeks ago get handed this incredibly plum, juicy role, I'm playing Freya, Queen of the Valkyries
I'm
in
so excited about
God
this
of
role.
War for Amazon.
Such an exciting.
Thank you. It's thrilling, and it's thrilling because it's just so out of the blue. I cannot stress enough how much I did not see this coming. I only auditioned for it months and months and months ago because it's the same people who did For All Mankind, that beloved space show that I did. Because I really haven't been even going out on things. I've just been like, I can't be bothered, guys. Let me just write my books. So this came out of the blue, and I have just come back from Vancouver last night, where I was there trying on wigs and tattoos and costumes and the whole thing. And I really was sitting in makeup being like, wow, it has been a minute since I have been around this many people. It's it's going to take a minute. It's not just the quite legitimate trembles of, am I up to this? Do I remember how to do it? Do I have forgotten how? But there was also the slightly assaultive thing of, I am not used to being around so many people. I'm not used to people owning my time, saying, yeah, we'll need you at 6:45, and me being like, but I'm what? But I'll still be sleeping at 6:45. It's a whole thing. And so that part, actually, the more practical part, feels slightly more schismatic right at this pronounced moment. The act of actually being on set and making a thing that feels like home to me. That feels entirely familiar, and oh, I know how to do this. I hope, let's see. But yeah, it's a wonderful thing to get to do both, and to get to do both simultaneously, because I was, writing on the plane on the way home and
Hmm.
feeling like, God, what a glorious compost to be in, that all these layers will start feeding one another.
Have you always, has writing always been kind of there for you?
Always, my whole life. Honestly, I think I've been nervous of, I, I have revered writing for so long. I'm an only child. My mum taught me to read when I was about 2.5. They have been my brothers and sisters'
Mhm.
books my whole life. You're a fellow reader. You know what that is.
Yeah.
And I think those 3 years at Oxford gave me a reverence for books that perhaps inhibited me for much, much longer than maybe I think what I'm trying to say is I should have done this earlier, and or everything takes the time it takes. I suspect I wasn't ready a single minute before um, I actually set pen to paper, but I now feel just impatient to write. I can't get them out. I just feel like I have so much to say. I have so many stories I want to tell. I got to get them all down.
We're gonna love to read all of them, and I feel like it usually is there for writers who are as good as you. It is usually always there somewhere, even if, you start it later. But I think that is reflected in your books as well, that understanding of people and situations and relationships that only time really can.
Mm.
I had, when I was really young, maybe 21 or 2, and trying to sell my first book, I had an agent tell me, you need to live more. You need more experiences. You
Mm.
can't. And I was so insulted,
Mm.
furious, because you can be a good writer without
Mhm.
being. But there's some truth in it as well,
Mm.
that the more you've experienced, the more you bring to it, the deeper the understanding. And I
Mm.
think certainly with Wifehouse, the depth of understanding of motherhood, of marriage, of relationships, friendships is really evident. So I think
Thank you.
perhaps you started at just the right time.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That's so lovely. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here today, Sonia. We appreciate it so much. I know you're tremendously busy, and especially with the new role and the publication of Wifehouse. Tonight, you will be actually at Diesel at
I
6:30
can't
p.m. Just
wait.
want to remind everybody about that. Wishing you the biggest success with Wifehouse. It's great.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And can I just say thank you for having me on the podcast, for having me in the store again. It's so meaningful to me. Diesel is such an exquisite space, just physically, emotionally, the way you curate the books, the way you hold space for writers that are, not all Sally Rooney, that, that you keep space on your shelves for us. I just thank you, really thank you. It is such important work that you do, and I really want to take the time to acknowledge it and thank you for it.
Thank you, Sonia. The pleasure is ours. Thank you very much.
You're so welcome.
Bye, everybody. We'll be back next week. We will have more publishers reps with us, and we will be discussing more books. In the meantime, Sonia's at the store at 6:30 today. Come out and see her. And have a wonderful week, everybody, and happy reading.